I've been a professional medium for the last 20 years plus. And in that time, I've never met anybody who's been to heaven, and I've never met anybody who's been to hell. And it's not that I don't necessarily believe that those places exist. I just don't believe that we get there on one shot. That's having had past life memories since I was a child. And also, I've met people who have done bad things, who are in the spirit world. And what I find actually happens is that if we cross into spirit and we have things that we have to, look at, things that we've done or things that have been done to us, that we are usually put into what I refer to as timeout. You can consider it a limbo space, but it isn't really completely limbo because you are doing something there. You're reviewing how, your actions, how they affected your life, how they affected other people's lives. But I've never actually met anybody who's gone to heaven or hell. I am a firm believer in reincarnation. Like you were saying, Paul, one of the things I've really noticed is that as a teacher, most people that I meet, I'd say that if I tell somebody when I'm doing a reading that they're a natural at something, it means they've done it for more than 3 lifetimes. And that also means that they are going to display examples of skill in an area that they have never trained in. So, I say that I'm a natural psychic medium. I've had these experiences. If you're like that, you're going to have it. Like you, Angie, you didn't want it when you were growing up because you thought that it wasn't safe or good, but you still had them. You didn't have a choice because you'd be considered somebody who is a natural at that. And when you go talk about healing, when I first started doing Reiki, I got my first Reiki attunement, I was immediately doing shamanic things. Immediately. I would call my teacher and I'd be like, how come I feel like I should blow into this person's heart chakra? How come I feel like I should be sucking something out of them? How come I feel like I should be doing this? And he'd be like, Sally, that's not Reiki, that's shamanism. And, that led me to finally looking at memories I had from past lives when I was a little kid and having to accept it. And interestingly enough, what I found was that I did not have a fear at all of the spirit world, and that was not where my fears around shamanism came from. My fears around shamanism came from loneliness, because one of the things I tell people is the water that the shaman drinks from is often too deep for most people. So nobody invites Joe the shaman over for coffee, okay? Because if stuff is going on in your life and your friend is that deep, that's usually the person you avoid unless you're ready to look at it yourself. So those of us who are in that weird department, we really value the people who become our true friends that we can talk to about anything. Because for most people, if they're not taking a class with you or things aren't going haywire in their life, you might be a little too much, even Christianity talks about reincarnation until, it got like dumbed down. Okay. Like it is a common belief in most religions. So my thought goes to more that of reincarnation without any real belief in an absolute heaven or an absolute hell, at least not in a one-shot experience.
Yeah. So in my experience through shaman school, we started exploring the middle world, which is where we're at now. And this is often where the spirits reside that haven't passed on. And then what we discovered is there's an upper world and a lower world. So we were asked to take journeys to the upper world and figure out what that was like. And so when I was exploring the upper world, I found it very angelic, and there was a lot of saints and mystics and, a lot of these higher vibrations there. So I'm like, well, then maybe that's heaven, but that maybe that's correlation to upper world. But when we said, now we're going to do a journey to the lower world, it wasn't hell. It was actually very lush and jungle-like. And there was a lot of animals, and it was beautiful. And it was like, the way I could best describe it is if you would see the earth without it being screwed up by humans, it's like in its natural state with just everything vibrant. And I'm like, wow, when I die, I want to go to the lower world. This is not hell at all. This is fantastic. And so that was the shocker for me. It was like, I couldn't find a hell in the afterlife. I couldn't find a hell anywhere. In fact, there was all all these different dimensions. In fact, one of our exercises in school was to go up into the upper world and continue up as high as you could go. And I remember going, okay, I'm going to go up, 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 up. And the next thing I know, I found myself in the lower world. And I was like, well, that's trippy. And when I got out of that state, I was really dizzy and disoriented. I'm like, well, I was just like, and what came to me as a vision, because the next exercise was to go to the lower world and go as low as you could go. And I would go down, down, down. And all of a sudden I was in the upper world. And so the vision was kind of like an infinity symbol, like a timer or something. You would go up and you could just, it loops around. And so it's all connected. And so then what I realized is that when you die, you can choose to go anywhere. It doesn't mean you have to stay. It's kind of like when you're born, you can choose to go anywhere. You don't have to be staying in California. If you were born in California, you can move anywhere in the world and you can travel anywhere you want. You have that free will, just like you do in the afterlife. So you might say, oh, I'm going to go up to the light and go up to this area that looks airy-fairy, but then you might go, well, I'm going to go back and visit my relatives in the middle world, and I might go into this jungle lush vegetation and hang out with the animals, and so there's all these different realms that are available. And so that's what I thought was amazing. It's like, wait, there's way more to the afterlife than we think. And so there's multiple dimensions, and there's places where they're just beautiful places where the soul can, rest in the ethers. And it's just like, wow. I saw things like you described where when the souls need to learn, they go into these chambers, like you said. And I've seen crystal chambers where souls are brought in so the light of the crystals can dissolve some of that charge that they were carrying. And they couldn't go back into life until they removed some of that charge because it was just so heavy. And so they would just be cleansing with crystals. And so I've seen all these different things. In fact, a recent client came to me asking to speak to her past brother. And she said, asked, what is he doing there in the afterlife? And he says, I'm studying, and I thought that was pretty interesting because he was learning. He goes, I'm learning. And she's like, what is he learning about? And he goes, I said, are you going to come back? He goes, well, that's the idea. And he had this and it was really funny because when I do that work, I feel the personality of the soul come out, and they still have that same personality, the same disposition. So he was just so funny and sarcastic, like, was he really sarcastic when he was alive? And she's like, oh my gosh, yes. I'm like, okay, good. And so that's really funny for me too. Like another recent one, there was this man who was her ex-husband. And he was just, when I'd ask questions, he'd be like, yes, no, yes. And I'm like, you know what? I'm like, does he not have a lot of emotion? Was he just, she's like, oh yeah, he never spoke about his emotions. So he was very dry in the answer. So finally I was like, listen, you need to give me something because all these yes, no questions don't validate what you're saying. I said, she needs to know. So then he started sharing with me like, okay, tell her that I know that she has a box with all my letters in it and there's seashells on the bottom and that sort of thing. And then I was like, thank you. Because then she's like, I do. And then I'm like, okay, because your yes, no answers are not getting us anywhere. And that's, she might feel a little comfort, but she might have this doubt like, well, Angie's just saying yes or no. So sometimes I have to prod people in that space to get there. But anyway, back to the question is, yeah, so I'd never have, just like Salicrow, I've never seen a hell. I've seen some really beautiful places that you could describe as heaven, but I've never seen a place where people are burning in hell.